If you're planning to travel outside the United States in the next few weeks and you're a green card holder, stop everything you're doing right now and listen to this. There is a new biometric system being rolled out at major American airports that is causing absolute chaos for permanent residents. And some people are being detained for hours, missing their connecting flights, and in some extreme cases, even having their green cards flagged for additional review. I'm not trying to scare you, but what I'm about to share with you could be the difference between a smooth trip and a nightmare at the airport that derails your entire travel plans. 3 days ago, I got a message from a subscriber named Maria, who had just gone through this experience at JFK Airport in New York. She's been a green card holder for 6 years, never had any issues with immigration, always filed her taxes, followed every rule. She was flying to visit her family in Colombia, something she's done probably 10 times since getting her green card. But this time was different. When she went through the exit process, she was pulled aside for the new biometric screening, and what should have taken 5 minutes turned into a 3-hour ordeal that almost made her miss her flight. By the time you finish watching this video, you're going to understand exactly what happened to Maria, why it's happening to thousands of other green card holders, and most importantly, what you need to do to protect yourself. Welcome to USA Visa Explained, where I break down the immigration policies and travel regulations that directly impact your life in America. I don't sugarcoat things. I don't give you the official government line that leaves out all the important details. I give you the real information you need to make smart decisions about your immigration status and your travel plans. And today's topic is urgent because this new biometric system is already operational at 15 major airports across the country, with plans to expand to all international airports by the end of March 2026. Let me start by explaining what this biometric exit system actually is, because the government hasn't done a great job of communicating this to the public. For years, the United States has had biometric entry systems where they take your fingerprints and photo when you enter the country. If you've ever gone through customs and border protection after an international flight, you've experienced this. You stand in front of a camera, they match your face to your passport, they take your fingerprints, and you're on your way. This has been standard for a long time. But what we haven't had until now is a comprehensive biometric exit system that tracks when people leave the country. The Department of Homeland Security has been working on this exit system for years, and the stated purpose is to track visa overstays and ensure that people who are supposed to leave the country actually do leave. In theory, this makes sense. If someone comes to the United States on a tourist visa that's valid for 6 months, the government wants to know if that person actually left after 6 months or if they overstayed. The problem is that this new system isn't just affecting people on temporary visas, it's also capturing data on green card holders and even American citizens, and the way it's being implemented is causing serious problems. Here's how the system works in practice. When you're leaving the United States on an international flight, you now have to go through a biometric verification station before you board your plane. This station has facial recognition cameras and fingerprint scanners. The system is supposed to verify your identity, confirm your travel documents, and log your exit from the country. For most people, this process takes about 30 seconds to 2 minutes. You look at the camera, it matches your face to the photo in the system, and you're cleared to board. But for green card holders, there's an additional layer of screening that's causing massive delays and confusion. The system flags green card holders for what's called a secondary review process. This happens seemingly at random, though immigration attorneys I've spoken with believe there are certain triggers in the system related to travel patterns, countries of origin, and length of time outside the United States. When you're flagged for secondary review, you're pulled out of the normal boarding line and taken to a separate area where customs and border protection officers conduct additional screening. This is where things get complicated and where people like Maria end up stuck for hours. During the secondary review, officers ask detailed questions about your travel plans, where you're going, how long you'll be gone, why you're traveling, when you plan to return, where you live in the United States, what your employment status is, and a whole series of questions that feel more like an interrogation than a routine exit screening. They're also running additional database checks that aren't part of the standard process. Several green card holders have told me that officers specifically asked about their time spent outside the United States over the past 5 years, questioned whether they're maintaining their permanent residence, and in some cases, suggested that they might be at risk of abandoning their green card status. This is where we need to talk about the legal requirements for maintaining a green card because this new system seems to be enforcing standards that go beyond what the law actually requires. As a green card holder, you're expected to maintain the United States as your permanent residence. This doesn't mean you can never travel internationally. It means you can't abandon your residence here. The general rule is that trips of less than 6 months are usually fine. Trips between 6 months and 1 year might raise questions but are often acceptable with proper documentation, and trips longer than 1 year require a re-entry permit to avoid being presumed to have abandoned your status. But what's happening at these biometric checkpoints is that officers are questioning people about much shorter trips and creating the impression that any international travel is somehow suspicious. Maria was going to Colombia for 3 weeks to attend a family wedding. 3 weeks is well within the normal range for international travel, and she had a return ticket, proof of employment in the United States, and her apartment lease. But the officer who interviewed her during secondary screening kept asking why she was traveling so often, even though she'd only been outside the country twice in the past year, once for 2 weeks and once for 10 days. He questioned whether she really considered the United States her home and suggested that if she keeps traveling like this, she might want to consider whether a green card is really appropriate for her situation. Let me be very clear about something. The officer's comments to Maria were inappropriate and not based on any legal standard. Traveling internationally 2 or 3 times a year for short trips does not put your green card at risk, and no immigration law says that green card holders should minimize their international travel. But the problem is that these officers have significant discretion in how they conduct these screenings, and some of them are using this new biometric system as an opportunity to question green card holders in ways that are intimidating and legally questionable. So, what actually happens during these secondary reviews? Based on the accounts I've gathered from multiple green card holders, here's the typical process. You're escorted to a separate screening area, usually a small office or room away from the main terminal. You're asked to sit and wait while the officer pulls up your immigration file on their computer. They're looking at your entire immigration history, every entry and exit from the country, any previous immigration petitions or applications, your naturalization eligibility if you've been a permanent resident long enough, and any flags or notes in the system. Then they start asking questions. The questions fall into several categories. First, they ask about your current trip, destination, purpose, duration, and return plans. This seems reasonable enough. Second, they ask about your residence in the United States. Where do you live? Do you own or rent? Who else lives there? How long have you lived at that address? Still fairly standard. But then third, they start asking questions that feel invasive and irrelevant. What's your employment situation? How much time have you spent outside the United States in the past year? Do you have family members living abroad? Are you planning to move back to your home country eventually? Have you thought about applying for citizenship? These questions go beyond what's necessary to verify your exit from the country, and they're clearly designed to assess whether you're maintaining your permanent residence. The fourth category of questions is the most concerning, and not everyone gets asked these, but enough people have reported them that it's worth mentioning. Some officers are asking about political activities, social media presence, religious practices, and associations with people or organizations that might be considered problematic. Green card holders have told me they've been asked whether they've attended protests, what political organizations they belong to, what they post on social media, and whether they know anyone who has been in trouble with immigration authorities. These questions are extremely troubling because they suggest that this biometric exit system is being used not just to track travel, but to gather intelligence on permanent residents. After the questioning, the officer makes a decision about whether to clear you for travel. In most cases, even after the lengthy secondary review, people are eventually cleared and allowed to board their flight, though often they've missed their original departure and have to be rebooked. But in some cases, officers place a notation in your file that you've been flagged for additional screening on your return to the United States. This means when you come back from your trip, you're likely to face another round of intensive questioning at Customs and Border Protection. And in a small number of cases, officers have actually told green card holders that they should consider applying for citizenship or that their travel patterns might lead to problems with maintaining their permanent residence in the future. Let me share another real example to show you how serious this can get. A subscriber named Chen contacted me after his experience at San Francisco International Airport. Chen has been a green card holder for 9 years. He works as a software engineer for a major tech company. He owns a home in California. His children go to school here, and he's fully integrated into American life. He was traveling to China to attend his father's funeral, obviously an urgent and emotional trip. When he went through the biometric exit screening, he was flagged for secondary review. The officer who screened him asked extensive questions about his ties to China, whether he owned property there, whether he had business interests there, how often he visited, and whether he planned to move back eventually. Chen explained that his father had just died and he was going to the funeral, but the officer seemed more interested in interrogating him about his long-term intentions than showing any empathy for his situation. The screening lasted nearly 2 hours, and Chen missed his original flight. He had to pay over $1,000 to rebook on the next available flight, which meant he arrived in China 12 hours later than planned and missed part of the funeral service. But what upset him even more than missing the flight was the feeling of being treated like a suspect rather than a lawful permanent resident who has every right to travel internationally. He told me he's been a model immigrant. He's never had any legal problems, he pays his taxes, he contributes to his community, and now he's being questioned about whether he really belongs in the United States. It's demoralizing, and it's making him question whether he wants to stay in a country that treats him this way. So why is this happening now? The official explanation from the Department of Homeland Security is that the biometric exit system is necessary to improve border security and track immigration compliance. They say it helps identify visa overstays, prevents immigration fraud, and ensures the integrity of the immigration system. All of that sounds reasonable on the surface. But what they're not saying is that this system is also being used to gather data on lawful permanent residents in ways that haven't been fully disclosed to the public. Immigration advocacy groups have raised concerns that this data collection goes beyond what's necessary for border security and creates a surveillance system that tracks the international movements of millions of people who have legal status in the United States. There's also a political dimension to this. The current administration has made it clear that they want to enforce immigration laws more strictly across the board, and that includes increasing scrutiny of green card holders. There's been a push to ensure that permanent residents are truly maintaining their residence in the United States and not using their green cards as a convenience to travel in and out of the country while actually living elsewhere. In principle, this makes sense. Green cards are meant for people who are permanently residing in the United States, not for people who want to maintain an option to live here without actually doing so. But in practice, the way this is being enforced through the biometric exit system is catching a lot of people who are legitimately maintaining their permanent residence and who just happen to travel internationally for normal reasons like family visits, business trips, or vacations. Now, let me give you the practical advice you need if you're a green card holder planning to travel internationally. First and most importantly, make sure you have documentation of your ties to the United States readily accessible when you travel. This includes proof of residence like a lease or mortgage statement, proof of employment like a recent pay stub or employment letter, evidence of family ties like children's school enrollment documents, and anything else that shows you're maintaining your life in the United States. You shouldn't need these documents just to leave the country, but if you're flagged for secondary screening, having them can help resolve the situation quickly. Be prepared for the possibility of missing your flight. I hate to say this, but if you have tight connections or if your travel plans are time sensitive, you need to build in extra time. If you're flagged for secondary review and it takes 2 or 3 hours, you need to have a backup plan. Some people are now booking flights with longer layovers or arriving at the airport 4 or 5 hours early for international flights just to be safe. It's ridiculous that this is necessary, but it's the reality right now. Know your rights during these screenings. You have the right to ask why you're being detained for secondary screening. You have the right to speak to a supervisor if you feel you're being treated unfairly. You have the right to remain silent in response to questions that go beyond your travel plans and resident status, though refusing to answer might extend your detention time. You have the right to contact an attorney, though in practice, most people don't have an attorney on standby at the airport. And you have the right to file a complaint after the fact if you believe your rights were violated, documenting exactly what happened, including the officer's name and badge number, the questions you were asked, and the duration of your detention, can be important if you decide to file a complaint or consult with an immigration attorney. Consider whether your trip is necessary right now. I'm not telling you not to travel, but I am saying that you should weigh the risks and benefits. If you have an urgent reason to travel, like a family emergency or a critical business meeting, then obviously you need to go. But if you're planning a discretionary vacation or a trip that could be postponed, you might want to wait a few months to see how this system develops and whether the implementation becomes smoother. Several immigration attorneys have told me they're advising their clients to minimize international travel for the next few months until there's more clarity about how this system works and what the actual risks are. If you're eligible for citizenship, this is another good reason to consider applying for naturalization. As a U.S. citizen, you won't be subject to the same level of scrutiny during these biometric exit screenings. Citizens can come and go from the country freely without anyone questioning whether they're maintaining their residence. If you've been a permanent resident for at least 5 years, or 3 years if you're married to a citizen, and you meet the other naturalization requirements, this might be a good time to start that process. Let me also address the specific airports where this system is currently operational, because not every airport has implemented it yet. As of right now, the biometric exit system with enhanced screening for green card holders is fully operational at New York, JFK, Newark, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, Chicago O'Hare, Atlanta, Houston, Washington Dulles, Boston, Seattle, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Las Vegas, and Philadelphia. If you're traveling through one of these airports, you're almost certain to encounter this system. Other airports are in the process of implementing it, and the plan is to have it nationwide by April 2026. So even if your local airport doesn't have it yet, it's coming soon. There are also specific countries that seem to trigger more intensive scrutiny during these exit screenings. Green card holders traveling to China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and certain Middle Eastern and African countries have reported higher rates of secondary screening. This appears to be based on countries of concern from a national security perspective, though the criteria aren't publicly disclosed. If you're traveling to one of these destinations, you should be especially prepared for the possibility of additional screening. Now, I want to talk about what this means for the future of immigration policy and permanent residence in the United States. What we're seeing with this biometric exit system is part of a broader trend toward increased monitoring and control of immigrants, including those with legal status. The days of green card holders being able to come and go from the United States with minimal scrutiny are ending. There's a growing expectation, both in policy and in enforcement, that permanent residents will be truly permanent, that they'll spend the vast majority of their time in the United States, that they'll minimize international travel, and that they'll demonstrate strong ties to this country. Whether you agree with this shift or not, it's happening, and green card holders need to adapt to this new reality. Some immigration experts I've spoken with believe this is just the beginning, and that we're going to see additional measures in the coming years that further restrict the rights and freedoms of permanent residents. There's talk of requiring green card renewals more frequently, implementing residency audits where permanent residents have to periodically prove they're maintaining their residence, and even creating different categories of green cards with varying levels of travel freedom based on how long you've been a permanent resident. None of this is law yet, but it's being discussed in policy circles, and the biometric exit system is laying the groundwork for this kind of increased monitoring. For those of you watching who are considering immigrating to the United States or who are in the process of getting your green card, this is important information to factor into your decision making. Permanent residence in the United States is still valuable and offers many benefits, but it's not what it used to be in terms of freedom of movement and freedom from government monitoring. You need to go into it with realistic expectations about the obligations and restrictions that come with that status. I also want to address the emotional and psychological impact of these experiences, because this isn't just about logistics and legal requirements. When you're detained at an airport, questioned for hours, made to feel like you're doing something wrong, even though you're following all the rules, it affects how you see yourself and your place in this country. Multiple green card holders have told me they feel like they're being treated as second-class residents, like they're barely tolerated rather than welcomed as permanent members of American society. This feeling of being perpetually under suspicion takes a toll on your mental health and your sense of belonging. And for people who have been in the United States for many years, who have built their lives here, who consider this their home, these experiences can be deeply painful and can make them question whether they made the right choice in immigrating here. The other issue is that these biometric screenings are inconsistent and unpredictable. You might travel 10 times and never be flagged for secondary review. And then on your 11th trip, you get detained for 3 hours. There doesn't seem to be clear criteria for who gets flagged and who doesn't, which creates anxiety and uncertainty every time you travel. You never know if this is going to be the trip where you have problems, and that uncertainty is stressful in itself. Before I wrap up, let me give you a few more actionable tips. If you are flagged for secondary screening, stay calm and be polite. I know it's frustrating and it feels unfair, but getting angry or confrontational with the officers is only going to make the situation worse and potentially extend your detention. Answer their questions truthfully but concisely. You don't need to volunteer extra information beyond what they specifically ask. If they ask where you're going, tell them. If they ask how long you'll be gone, tell them. But don't start explaining your whole life story unless they ask for it. If you're asked questions that seem inappropriate or invasive, you can politely decline to answer and ask to speak to a supervisor. You can say something like, "I don't understand how that question relates to my travel today, and I'd prefer to speak with your supervisor." This won't necessarily get you out of the screening faster, but it does create a record that you objected to the questioning. And if you do end up filing a complaint or consulting with an attorney later, it's helpful to have established that you didn't voluntarily provide information that went beyond what was legally required. Make sure your green card is valid and not expiring soon. If your green card is going to expire in the next 6 months, renew it before you travel. An expiring green card can create additional complications during these screenings. Also, make sure all your contact information is up to date with USCIS. If they need to reach you for any follow-up questions or if there's an issue with your file, you want them to be able to contact you easily. If you have any criminal history, even minor offenses, consult with an immigration attorney before traveling internationally. Certain criminal convictions can make international travel risky for green card holders, and you want to understand your specific situation before you leave the country. The biometric exit system might flag your criminal history, and you could face additional scrutiny or even be denied re-entry in extreme cases. Finally, document everything. If you're detained for secondary screening, Make notes about what happened as soon as you're released. Write down the date, time, location, the officer's name and badge number if you can get it, the questions you were asked, how long you were detained, whether you missed your flight, and any statements the officer made about your status or travel. This documentation can be crucial if you need to file a complaint, consult with an attorney, or challenge any actions taken against you. Thank you so much for watching us a Visa Explained. If this video helped you understand what's happening with the new biometric exit system and how to protect yourself, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you get notified when I post updates on this situation. Drop a comment below and share your experience. If you've gone through one of these biometric screenings, your stories help other viewers understand what to expect and how to prepare. Share this video with any green card holders you know who might be planning international travel, because this information could save them hours of stress and potentially thousands of dollars in rebooking fees. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue covering the immigration policies and travel regulations that affect your life in America. Until then, travel safely, know your rights, and don't let these new systems intimidate you into giving up your freedom of movement as a lawful permanent resident.